like, oh. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Virginia's for Conspiracy Lovers. Stoked tonight. I've got one of my favorite guests, Mr. Jordan Ramey of the soon-ish to come book, Shakespeare is Climate Change. This guy writes books as if he's written 10 of them before, and he's on his first one. He sends me chapters here and there when he gets them done, and they blow my mind. They're better on the subject of uh the esoteric qualities of um Shakespeare and that whole milieu than honestly than I've read. Met him through Robert Frederick of the Hidden Life is Best podcast. Always thank you, Robert. Anyway, Jordan's on tonight to talk to us about what will probably be chapter 4 of this awesome book he's writing. Shakespeare's Cauldron. Is that the working uh
So Shakespeare's Climate Change is still the book.
the
Uh,
book,
this
but
this chapter four went from a 20-page chapter four to an 80-page standalone essay called Shakespeare's Cauldron.
and it's rad. And really interesting. I don't know if this is confirmation bias, but the last like 3 guests that I've had on, accidentally their research and stuff has dovetailed. I mean, our research has kind of always dovetailed just because I touch on Shakespeare. You go really in depth in it, and then he's kind of a background figure in the whole Francis Bacon, esoteric beginnings of America, which is like more on my end of research. But um, dude, everything has been pulling me back to the original Canaanite tribes, and some of my recent research and presentations have been all about tracing the Stuart bloodline back through the Templars into the Plantagenets into the Merovingians, because if you follow the female side of the bloodline, it goes all the way back, at least to the Merovingians, but I think that I make a pretty decent circumstantial argument for evidence of it going back all the way to the original Canaanite tribes, most likely the tribe of Sidon. Um, and so anyway, my overarching thesis now is that Freemasonry and what we live in America now is kind of the breakaway civilization for the Stuart Plantagenet Merovingian dynasty. Um and they shared and or adopted or inherited the ideals of the original Holy Land Canaanite tribes of Baal and Queen of Heaven worship. And all of it's a whole bunch of different um, explanations for the same thing when you really look back. And there's a clear line that kind of comes to a choke point with Bacon and Shakespeare, and then craps out the other side as America. But and then back the other direction. It's a fairly clear line. Um, from the Gnosticism, Rosicrucianism of Bacon, that's kind of the way it was. Once it gets to him, it filters back out, as that, and it's kind of anyway. I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna let you go. If you got
To
any
finish that,
starting,
it all mixed with science in a
yeah,
really disturbing way.
that's what I was gonna. It comes as all this Baal, Queen of Heaven worship, all the way back from the beginning of time, which I think is Baal and Queen of Heaven worship is just the cursed tribes after the flood falling back into worshiping what God sent the flood to destroy, which was these Nephilims and hybrid fallen angels or whatever. And that morphs and warps and changes depending on the geographic region that the Phoenicians bring it to. It changes and adopts a little bit of the whichever pagan culture is that they're infiltrating. But it really it stays the same. All the different from Inanna to Isis to Ishtar to Astarte to Asherah. It's all the same Queen of Heaven. I think Baal kind of gets once the Merovingians uh get a hold of it in like the 400s and 500s. That's when Christianity is coming on real hot and heavy with the backing of the Roman Empire at this point. They're now the state religion, and I think that's when the kind of male side, the Baal side of this mystery tradition, kind of takes a secretive backseat, and then the Queen of Heaven side, the Ishtar, Isis side, it it just stays in the forefront as it always does. It just gets folded into Marian worship, and then that's how kind of we see it moving forward from that point. I do think it's interesting that there was a point in history where there is a clear delineation of, you've got the Gaulish tribes becoming the Sicambrian Franks, um, and they very shortly after taking power kind of get influenced by Christianity. And then that is kind of the point that you don't see as many, bull as much bull symbolism, as much child sacrifice. That kind of takes a backseat done in the back rooms and in secret, more occulted. But the Queen of Heaven side, which is interesting because that is the way that you can trace it back. You find all these similarities in this Queen of Heaven worship from modern day Marian worship to all the way back to the Levant. Anyway, I said I'm going to shut up, and now I'm going to shut up, dude. So go. I interrupted you when you were trying to help me out of a ramble, and then I started rambling again. I'm going to let you
You're
go.
right though. It's very consistent throughout time, and it's they give it different names and it kind of has different coverings and slightly different symbols, but when you look behind it, it's really the same thing over and over and over again. And I think
Yeah.
that's what you were getting at.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe for those
so
of, I mean, I've got 2 episodes with you, in the back catalog there, but for anybody, just a real quick, 90-second pitch of how you got into it and where your research started, and then just go. And then I really am going to shut up.
so I was listening to Robert Frederick on I forget this every freaking time.
The GOAT, Robert
Greg
Frederick,
Greg Carlwood, whatever his podcast is.
the
Uh
higher side chats.
there
Greg
you go.
Carlwood, if you're out there, I've already hit one bucket list with I was on tinfoil hat. That was big bucket list for me. I want to be on the higher side chats. I just want to say what's up.
So I listened to the first free hour, of course, because I'm cheap,
Yeah, me
and
too.
had an epiphany. I actually recently went back and listened. He gave the full 2 hours of everything away for free for like a week. I went back
Yeah.
and listened. I was like, oh, I should listen to the full 2 hours that started this whole thing for me. And I listened to it and I was like, oh, damn, Robert was there 2 years ago, where it took me 2 years to get to.
Yeah, but I'm sure that there's things in your research that, I mean, he even said it. I mean, there's parts and pieces that you just overlook in any research, and somebody comes along with a fresh take and is like, "Oh yeah." Yeah, so I'm sure.
So,
Sure. Anyway, go
so
ahead.
I was listening to that and had an epiphany, and this idea of Shakespeare as climate change came to my mind. And I think previously I said to describe that, it's that climate change as a social lie that's foisted upon us is basically carried out by the intellectual spring of the Shakespeare opera,
There we go.
right? So that's kind of the idea behind Shakespeare's climate change, and that took me down a long, long path. That I think I'm on chapter 8. I'm probably on chapter 8 now. But I've taken a long break to get into this Venus and Adonis thing, which was kind of sparked by chapter 4. And I guess how it started is I noticed that in Venus and Adonis there was tons of alchemical language, and it was just like the red rose and the white lady, and they're mixing together, and silver doves, and just all this stuff. And I was like, man, why is there so much alchemical language in this poem? What's the
Yeah.
point? And I think eventually what I came to believe is that there's 2 points. I think primarily it's signaling to other people that know, right? They're like, oh shit, he's using those words. And so they just like a Freemason would pick up on Shakespeare being
Yeah.
Freemasonic.
Or
It's
the
those.
architecture and the ley lines and the symbolism that they leave behind. I say that there's mystery school graffiti all over the face of the planet, and it's in art and architecture and plays and poetry and whatnot. And it is, I mean, there's no better way to you know ensure that your ideas and ideals will stand the test of time than encoding them like that. You might not be able to guarantee that your particular order that lives and dies by this set of ideals will last forever in that you know in that kind of setup or whatever. But if you leave it out there, the ideals always come through, and somebody can pick up on that later. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, but
Yeah, yeah. And really it's when we're talking about alchemy, or this kind of sub rosa veneration of the ancient gods, um, it it comes as like a supernatural unction almost, I think, right? So these
mm.
people are connecting to something much deeper that's before and after them, and they're kind of channeling it.
Yeah, I think that, the further back you go in time, the thinner the kind of veil was between the natural and the supernatural. And when you get back there, all the writing and art and whatnot is a little bit more on the nose. They're just kind of saying it in plain language. And I think now we all, everybody looks back at a lot of that stuff as allegory. And I don't think that it necessarily was. I don't think it became allegory until later on when they had to hide it a little bit more. But when you're talking about, the early Canaanite tribes, are you murdering
A
a
fucking
spider right now?
honeybee. One of
A
my
honeybee.
honeybees making too much damn noise.
That's a Freemasonic symbol. They're spying on
Yeah,
you, bro.
yeah. The queen of heaven, she came in.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I've always found it funny that, everybody thinks that these ancient, writings and things like that are deep deep allegory and symbolism. And I think in a lot of cases it was a little bit more on the nose. And then as it comes forward, it becomes more and more and more occulted and takes on these many layers of like cloaking. And then the allegory really sets in to explain something that I don't think was really seen as allegory
Yeah, yeah, it gets
back
confused. You
then.
see that you see that
Yeah.
in the grimoire writings too. It starts off
Yeah.
as very straightforward, like here's how you contact the demon, use these names, kill these things. And it
Yeah.
becomes, later on, oh, to control the world through the spirit of mind, and they incorporate all this Kabbalah language that
Yeah.
scrambles the mind. Um, so
Yep.
yeah, in Venus and Adonis, the question was, why is there this alchemy here? And I think it's signaling primarily uh, to say, hey, look, this is a working, to the initiated, so that they understand it. So
Yeah.
then, why would you need to make Venus and Adonis something that's full of kind of an initiate hints? And I think that gets to the other purpose as to what it was for, and it was for social alchemy. It was to change society, and ultimately, I think we can see this coming into a little bit more clarity. I think it's sort of um, this confirmation of the Queen of Heaven and her consort, whatever you want to call him, the Green Man,
Yeah.
nature, and
Ball.
Yeah. And it's all coming together
Yeah,
in sort of this new science, a spiritual science that we kind of see developing,
yeah.
which we can talk about Epstein in relation to that maybe towards the end a little bit more.
Hey, yeah, go for it, man.
So,
Let me ask you
uh,
this real quick. As
yeah.
far as alchemy goes, because that is it's one of those alchemy itself. I know it's a really big portion because it all kind of revolves around it, but it is one of those pieces that I just kind of put to the side and was like, yes, alchemy is a thing. It was a it's a big influence. It's kind of the backbone of the worldview, or at least at some point it took over to explain the worldview of the mystery schools. But it is one of those things that like it's hard to make heads or tails of because the explanation of it from the horse's mouth is so occulted and so symbolic that I just put it to the side and went, okay, alchemy, yes, that's the thing that Bacon was into, and it's all a part of this. But you know, it's one of those things that I was like, I've already spent all this time looking into my research. Like this, I feel like I need to, take a PhD level like look at alchemy to be able to even apply it to what I'm doing. Is there like, are there any books or anything that you've come across or places that you would suggest that can give a dummy like me an overview of alchemy that makes that probably not, right? It's alchemy. It's
Yeah.
kind of chaos, right?
So
It
I did
means
most of my
everything and it means nothing. It's turning lead into gold, and it's also how to make yourself a god. And none
I
of those and all of those things, right? I mean, from what I've read about alchemy, that's the gist I get. It can be applied to everything. And I think that a bit of that was purposeful kind of obfuscation over what whatever it really is. That makes no
Absolutely. So
sense.
the whole philosophy is an elitist philosophy of secrecy and blinds and knowledge for the initiated, for the deserving. This is very
Hmm.
magical. You find the same things in magic.
Yeah.
And as far as a particular book or something modern that could kind of break it down for you, honestly, I didn't really read any modern books on alchemy. I went straight to the sources, and read what they
Really?
had to say. And
Yeah.
they are confusing as hell. They almost make no sense, but
Yeah.
you can you can get some basic things out of it beyond their blinds and their confusion and their double speak. Um, and I think what I boiled it down to for the purpose of the book is transmutation,
Hmm.
and that it's the mixing of two things intentionally to produce one new thing. Right. So you could
Right.
apply that to metal, right? You could say, oh, we're mixing these two substances together to produce gold or to produce silver, or you could apply it to medicine, right? We're doing this to produce the elixir of life. Or you could apply it to society, right? Like we're going to interject certain ingredients that cause people to think a certain way that changes our society, right? So we're mixing our society
Mm.
and we're mixing the ingredients that we add to our society and we're producing the society that we want, the golden result, basically.
Okay.
And I think that's a pretty
That's
basic way where you can take all the craziness and apply it to all the different versions of alchemy, right? Spiritual
yeah.
alchemy, metallurgical alchemy. So fundamentally, I think it's transmutation and the ability to combine things to make a new thing that you desired to create.
Yeah, just almost a catch-all term for elitists doing shady stuff to produce what they wanted without anybody else knowing.
Yeah,
whether
yeah.
whether it's societal or precious metals or yeah. Okay.
And so
I
I
like that
think
explanation.
the metal alchemy and kind of alchemy as we generally think of it became discredited because it was a lot of bullshit.
Right.
There were a lot of snake oil salesmen and dudes getting locked up in towers because they said they could do shit that they couldn't do. And
Right.
I think Bacon even said, if they could do what they said they were going to do, we'd have castles filled with. Actually, maybe that wasn't Bacon. I don't know. Anyway, it.
Sounded like a good point though.
So some dude from the 1500s said, if they could do what they said they could do, we'd have castles full of gold. Um,
Right.
but as a philosophy, it goes much deeper, right? And it ends up becoming this idea of the arts of man, meaning everything that man does with his hands, right? The if you want to get biblical about it, the idols that he creates with his hands. Um, in the alchemical philosophy, they have the ability to have power over nature. Whereas prior to this alchemical philosophy kind of infecting Europe, it was generally understood along the lines of Aristotle, whereas the arts of man were basically a cheap representation of nature, right? It was attempting to represent nature, but not
Right.
overcoming or doing better than nature. But alchemy said, no, we can do better than nature. And that is fundamentally Francis
Mhm.
Bacon's philosophy.
And that's and there comes the attempt to reach back into the mystery schools and magic, as it were, or the technology of the fallen to produce something that's better than nature. It's the same Gnostic ideal of becoming your own God. You're overcoming God's
which
law and God's natural law to
which really boils down to the fact that we don't have access to the tree of life, right? So
right,
according to the biblical account, we have access to knowledge of good and evil, but we don't have access to the tree of life. And so
mm,
the fundamental goal of the alchemists was the philosopher's stone, right? Basically to have all knowledge and to live forever.
right,
And that is the combining of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life that we're, barred from.
right,
And that really is kind of the antichrist undertone in alchemy and in science, and kind of in Bacon's conception, as I understand it, that man by his works can improve everything and take dominion over nature.
right. Which would be just thinking logically would be the philosophy and aim of a fallen race of angels because they screwed up.
So
They don't get the other side anymore. So now we're on Earth. Let's figure out a way to you know a cheat code to get where we want to be, which is back to paradise, which
and
we
this is
were.
absolutely what it is. So even Zosimos, the first alchemist that we know of, he was writing in like the 4th century AD, I think in
Okay.
Alexandria. Excuse me. He wrote that it was from the fallen angels. I could maybe find you the quote here, but
Really?
yeah, he said we got the art of chemia from
Right.
the race of demons that mixed with human women and created giants, more or less.
No kidding.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find it.
These are awful, by the way. Um, Kroger brand cranberry lime sparkling water is not a sponsor. It's disgusting.
Noted.
Don't do it.
All right. So Zosimos says the Holy Scriptures say that there is a race of demons who avail themselves of women. Nearly every book, esoteric and exoteric, makes mention of this. So the ancient and divine scriptures said this, that certain angels lusted after women, and having descended, taught them all the work all the works of nature. The same scriptures say that from them the giants were born. The first transmission from them regarding these arts is from Chemu. He called, I think that's a person, probably a giant from the context. He
Okay.
called this book the Book of Chemu, whence also the art is called chemia. So
Oh wow.
there's lots of debate about where the term alchemy came from. People say, oh, uh, it's Islamic. Other people say, oh, it has to do with Egypt and the black soils of Egypt and Kim. But
Right.
Zosimos says it came from what I'm making the assumption is a giant, although again in the context it could be a fallen angel or what he calls a demon, that mated with women. and that's where we get this art called Kimia. So you're not far off at all. You're actually spot on, and this has been the perspective of of the first known alchemist, at least.
I, I here's the part that blows me away. From I have a Christian worldview, and so I have the two forces. I have God and the devil, for want of a better, more accurate terms. But like, it's pretty clear. Like, there's all these subsections and cultures and things like that, and people go off down these roads, and they're like, no, this is where it started. But it seems awfully clear that you can trace it all back to um the beginning being good, evil, and an event where there were fallen. There were I mean, you can see that in the Sumerian text. You can see that if you want to go ancient aliens. I mean, it all they don't all end at the same place. We don't all sit on our worldviews like in the same place, but they all tend to go back to the same idea that there was a God, there were some angels or some beings or some divine council, and some of those guys were dicks and they got booted, right? Um, and I don't know. I just always find it interesting that um a lot of these different kind of worldviews they cut it short. You know what I mean? They cut it short before you get back that far. Um, I don't know. That was
I would say that they have it
interesting.
180 degrees, the wrong perspective. So
Yeah,
we can
that's
see in this modern UFO disclosure thing that basically what we're talking about, the creatures that gave the art of Chemu would be received as space brothers, that want to bring
right,
us into the next stage of evolution. And so
right.
we can see how alchemy became science, became the old religion.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just there's nothing new under the sun, I suppose.
And the crazy thing is this kind of reverting back to like all this Silicon Valley kind of new age movement. They're almost going back in reverse. They're almost paying homage to where it came from, whether they know it or not. These hyper scientists and technocrats and whatnot have gotten so far down that road that they're now looking back and getting involved in all this new age stuff, which is just a reflection of the original mystery religions and whatnot, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I mean,
So
Peter Thiel is giving
yeah,
lectures on the Antichrist, and his favorite author is Francis Bacon, and his favorite book is The New Atlantis.
of course it
And
is. Anybody who says their favorite book is The New Atlantis is a sociopath. Because if you've ever read that book, which I have, I've pored over it for years because I'm positive that it's a cipher because it's lousy with numbers. I mean, you can't go
yeah,
3 words without hitting a number. It's like we had 9 boats and there was 3 people in each boat and they asked us how many of us were sick and we said 17, but there was 50 of us and they put us in 15 rooms and 20, like, I mean, if you like that, but like, it's interesting, yes, especially the end of it when it gets into all the kind of predictions that ended up coming true and whatnot. But it is obnoxious to read. It is by far the worst thing that Francis Bacon ever wrote.
I think
It's a
not
crappy
only
short
lousy with
story.
not only lousy with numbers, lousy with deep meaning. I think really,
Yeah.
which is what makes it
Well,
interesting.
I think those numbers correspond to a Shakespeare play. I don't want to give it away too much, but
Keep it to yourself.
Um, I think that it directly corresponds with the first play in the first folio of
The
Shakespeare.
Tempest.
Oh, yeah, The Tempest. It's they were written roughly around the same time. They theorized that he started the New Atlantis around 1613. The Tempest was written, I mean, the event that inspired the Tempest happened in 1609 on the way to Jamestown. the crash landing of the Sea Venture on the island of Bermuda. Um, and then William Strachey, the guy who lived on the island of Bermuda for a year while they built two boats and then finally made it over to Jamestown, writes his full account of that year on Bermuda in 1610, sends it back across the ocean to somebody involved with Bacon, and then in 1611, The Tempest is written. And I mean, The Tempest shares like three different character names that are like one or two letters off from actual historical people who were on Bermuda. And then obviously I go to a whole thing, but The Tempest is the last play written by Shakespeare, but it's the first play included in the first folio. There's if you get it's hard to get an original copy, but I've gone through the original, like the facsimile, the photocopies of one of the early versions of the Tempest, and the word Tempest is found like in the first like paragraph. It even like the first like few sentences has like directions from where they were. It says they were in Peru, which I think is an anagram for Europe. It says that they left from the South Sea, which you're thinking uh uh the Asian South Sea, but actually Plymouth, the part of the English Channel that is right by there's that Plymouth opens up into, which Plymouth is where the supply mission left from. That has always historically been called South Sea. And then if you follow the directions, it says we left and we sailed for a certain amount of time west, west by southwest, and then we hit a tempest like this much time out, or we hit strong winds, which that's what happened in the third supply mission to Jamestown, which resulted in the crash landing on Bermudas. They hit a hurricane, all the ships were dispersed, and and it says that because in the New Atlantis, it's a ship of about 50, it's a ship with about 50 people on it who are basically lost at sea and bump into this Rosicrucian uh island that nobody knew existed.
Secret
And
society.
there's one particular ship in that third supply mission that was never seen again. Assumed that it sank, or in the storm. Um, but it says we hit strong winds and it pushed us north, and it says with a point east. So like just barely east, and if you follow that up, it goes straight to Nova Scotia, which is interesting from where. Anyway, I think those two, the New Atlantis and the Tempest, are connected, and I think that in one way, shape, or form, the New Atlantis is the numbers, the code, and I think you somehow work it out using the Tempest, but I haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, no, I'd be interested in, yeah, no. I'd be interested in reading the Tempest and New Atlantis with those in mind.
Also, the Tempest is one of the most. I think the New Atlantis is one of Bacon's crappier works, and I think that, and a lot of people think that the Tempest is one of the worst Shakespeare plays.
Yeah, yeah. I
It's
mean, I
really,
totally disagree. I feel like the New Atlantis is the only readable Bacon.
well, it's a story. I can read his like you know um kind of mathematical and scientific you know ideas easier because they make sense to a certain degree.
Oh, his language is just so tough.
Yeah, it's that.
Good Lord.
I mean, you should have got dragged to two Shakespeare plays a year since you were 9 years old by your crazy mom,
Yeah,
and
it's
then
almost less
you
the wording and more like the the infinite commas. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's very punctuated.
it's very
Yeah.
difficult. It's
Fits and
like
starts. Yeah.
paragraph long sentences.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't know what a period was. Just throw a comma in there. We're still talking. Don't worry about it. It's only one guy talking. There's no reason to anyway. Um, all right, continue. But you were a long time ago, you were getting into Venus and Adonis, and I interrupted you and sidetracked you.
So the questions were, why would he hide this alchemical language in there?
Right.
And the answers were signaling and social alchemy. So to tell everybody, hey, look, this is a working, keep your mouth shut. And then the working itself is the process of changing the culture, right? And basically with the aim of world empire, because they were right on the precipice of that, right? They could, as you were talking about, they were going to the new world, and they were imagining this scientific secret society that could have all this amazing technology. And so the working uh, in Venus and Adonis is a part of that. And Venus and Adonis, by the way, was the most popular Shakespeare production by far
Right.
uh, during the life of Bacon and Shakespeare.
Okay.
So um, if the intent is social alchemy and to change people, I thought maybe I could look back at some of the other plays and see, because it's basically propaganda, right? I'm using the
Yeah.
term alchemy because it's appropriate, but
Right.
it's a little theatrical, I suppose. It's really propaganda.
Yeah.
And so to look back at Shakespeare propaganda, well, we know the histories were they're recognized propaganda at this point. You can read them with that in mind, and it's hilarious actually.
Yeah. It's imperialist propaganda.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
even
sure.
specifically Tudor propaganda. Like there's
Yeah.
so much about Henry VII, how great he is in Henry VI and Richard III.
Yeah.
Um, so I decided to look back at the history plays and see, okay, does this social alchemy and signaling thing apply to what I know is propaganda? And all of the history plays are about the Plantagenet, the Plantagenets, and they come out of Geoffrey V of Anjou, who married the daughter of Henry I, who was the King of England.
Right. So that would be the first foray, the Plantagenets into English rule, right? The Plantagenets are come from the, if I'm not mistaken, they come from, yeah, they come from the Carolinians.
I would I would bet that they definitely do, right? They're
Yeah,
they're from Anjou.
yeah,
So the heart of France.
yeah. I think that I think the order goes Merovingian, and then through the female side, they marry into the, I can't remember the name of the like the it starts with a P. They marry into that family, and that essentially creates the Charlemagne side, which is the Carolinians,
Yeah, yeah.
um, and and then from the Carolinians come the Plantagenets. I can't
So
remember. Yeah, go ahead.
so Plantagenet is just a moniker. It's just a
Hmm.
title given to Geoffrey V, and he was the first one to have it, and then his offspring used it. And
Right.
uh, actually, it's not clear how many of his offspring used the name. It may have been repopularized with Shakespeare.
Really?
Yeah. So, where was I going? Oh yeah, so the Plantagenets, looking back at them as this sort of social alchemical working, and to see if I could find that in there also. I found Geoffrey V, and just to make a quick Templar connection, because that's always fun. His
Mhm.
father was Fulk V,
Right.
who was basically married into the position of becoming the king of Jerusalem.
Right.
So the Plantagenets are essentially a direct line from the king of Jerusalem to the kings of England, which would have been very significant to them, right?
Right.
They thought of Jerusalem as a place they wanted to control, even in Shakespeare's day.
Right.
So
So
moving forward, the name Plantagenet is actually an alchemical reference, and directly so. So it comes from planta genista, which is the broom plant, uh,
Oh,
with
I read this. This is awesome. Yeah,
which
go.
ha- which has
Sorry.
all types of magical connections, right? This is the broom that witches ride on. The stories go that they would put like hen's bane or wolf bane on the broom shaft and then ride around on it, with with it in contact with their anus,
Right.
and have some sort of magical flying like experience. So this broom plant, everyone acknowledges that that's how Geoffrey Plantagenet got his name, but they usually offer really ridiculous explanations. They're like, "Oh, he loved it so much he would wear it in his hat. He would wear a little sprig of broom in his hat, and so they called him Plantagenet." Or there's another explanation that says, "Oh, he loved it so much that he would plant it all over his lands
Right.
and use it as a hunting blind, and he would hide behind these bushes to hunt deer or whatever." But if you look at the term, plantagenista means essentially plant generations. And
Right.
if you look at the origin of the name Plantagenet, it's directly connected with an ancient philosophical concept of man's vegetable soul.
Right.
And so this vegetable soul goes way back, and there were lots of different opinions on it from, Aristotle and the Roman philosophers. And what the alchemists did with it is they basically said it was the basis of all creation. So it was like the fundamental building block, the prima materia. And so by the time you get to Isaac Newton, the alchemist, he's talking about making metal trees, and
Right.
so I was reading one of these alchemical texts called Rosarium Philosophorum, the Rosary of the Philosophers. And in there, he specifically says that the philosopher's stone is basically a green springing sprig, a new fresh green fruit. And he says, so everyone should know that the philosopher's stone is green. And beyond Plantagenet meaning the broom plant, Plantagenista, it also means hairy shoot or sprig. Literally the same sense that the alchemist was using uh, the term to mean a new shoot, or uh,
Right.
this idea of a new springing sprig for the philosopher's stone. And so Geoffrey Plantagenet is 100% a reference to alchemy and to the philosopher's stone. And a lot of people would say, "Oh, well, they maybe didn't have that information back then," because when we're talking about Geoffrey V, we're looking at the early to mid 1100s. I think he died in like 1151.
Okay.
So to get a few other ideas as to, maybe what Geoffrey Plantagenet's perspective was, I took a look at his effigy on his tomb. And what you see there is basically, trying to find it here, he's standing between two pillars, which is very Masonic, although obviously far before Masonry.
Hmm.
And they're wrapped in vines, and they've got leaves coming off the pillars. He's dressed in green, this very
Hmm.
nature green philosopher's stone thing going on, which later we can connect to the Green Man,
Right.
uh, who is Adonis, just as a spoiler. But anyway, if you look at his effigy, what you see is in the background a whole bunch of small white lilies, and above him you see crescent moons on these buildings that are behind him, and then on his shield you see red standing lions.
Okay.
And so what I found a little bit after finding this enamel effigy is that those are all symbols not of only of alchemy, but also of all of the ancient goddesses. They're symbols of Venus and Ishtar,
Okay.
Inanna, every single one of them. So my perspective is that in this enamel effigy, Geoffrey is basically being represented as the male version of this ancient religion, right? So the what you might call Adonis, or the child sacrifice, or Baal.
Right.
Uh, and I've actually found, I can't remember what they're called. They're little stone effigies that they would put the dead babies in. Sorry for being so graphic.
Yeah,
But
yeah. No, I've heard about this.
man, I can't remember what they're called.
They would
Tofits? I
like
think they're
bury
called
them in
tofits.
and they'd build them into the base of their like homes and stuff. Like back in like the Holy Land or whatever in the Levant, the Canaanite tribes, they would sacrifice their firstborns and then build them in that stone or clay. I've heard them referred to as like jars or pots.
Yeah, so I think they would put these pots inside of these little stone tomb things that are called tofits.
Have
Am I?
you have you ever heard? I just listened to somebody talk about this today. I can't remember what I was watching or listening to, but supposedly the London Bridge that fell down, London Bridge is falling down, whatever. That whole song refers to the fact, supposedly, I can't remember who this was. He could have been crazy. I don't know. But supposedly that they found when they excavated the fallen down London Bridge, they found like 30 children buried into the base of it, right? And then some guy in like Lake Havasu at
Hmm.
some point bought all of the fallen down London Bridge, had it shipped over, and then used it to build like Lake Havasu. And then there's all this creepy stuff about like child trafficking and stuff
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
there are some disturbing stories about it these days.
But I just found that interesting that it was the London Bridge and possibly some connective tissue with, these bloodlines doing the same sorts of thing because it was supposed to imbue your structure with whatever the power of the fallen angels, the gods, whatever it was. That's why the original, Baal worshiping Canaanite tribes would sacrifice their children to Baal, and then they would put them in these clay jars, and then build them into the base of their homes.
So some of these tofits that I've seen, I think the ones that I saw were from Carthage, if I remember correctly,
Okay.
which would be a continuation of this same type of thing.
Yep, 100%.
They
Nations
look
brought everything to Greece.
these tofits where they were keeping these dead children who would represent, the male half of this ancient male female god and goddess worship. These tofits look exactly, well, not exactly, but very much like this enamel effigy of Jeffrey
Really?
Plantagenet. Yeah, very much so.
Wow.
I did not include that in the book
Yeah, I
just
didn't.
because it
I
was getting
saw
too
the
long.
enamel um picture, but I didn't see
So
the
there's also other
yeah.
indications that he definitely knew about the Philosopher's Stone and that he had some sort of Gnostic alchemical worldview, magical worldview. And I found that in a book called Dragmaticon Philosophy, and that was written by a guy named Wilhelm von Conches, who was the tutor to Geoffrey V's son, who would become Henry II, King of England.
Okay. Also a
And
great name for a metal album. What was the name of that book again? Dragmatic.
Dragmaticon Philosophy.
Yeah, that's a great metal album.
And that was written in like 1230. And there's a picture in that book of Geoffrey and this philosopher Wilhelm sitting there talking. And Geoffrey says to him, it's all in Latin, and this is my translation. So take it with a grain of salt. But I think it's pretty close, or I wouldn't have put it in there. I spent some time on it. He says, first of all, from you, what is the substance that I want? And the philosopher responds, the thing existing in itself, a substance it is said to be. And he's talking about the prima materia there, right? So they're
Right.
very much involved in this kind of accessing these fundamental truths of nature to gain knowledge and power.
Hmm.
And in that picture where they're talking like that from Dragmaticon Philosophy, Jeffrey is no surprise sitting on a flower throne and he's wrapped in a green sash that kind of looks like a vine, which totally fits in with his,
Hmm.
being this green man aspect of the goddess and the child sacrifice. So I found all that and I was like, okay, I think I'm on the right track, because basically all
Cool.
of Shakespeare's history plays are wrapped up in this guy, right, at its base,
Yeah.
and his father, the King of Jerusalem. And within that, you find the entire Wars of the Roses and Henry VI, and there's so much alchemical symbolism there. It's just ridiculous. Um, but I decided to go even further back and look at these gods, because I thought that's what it was pointing to, as you've already keyed into. And what you find is the same stuff over and over again, right? If you start in Sumeria, you find tiny lions. I think maybe she's represented as a giant. They don't call them tiny lions in the text,
Right.
but when you see the images, she's huge compared to the lions, just like
Hmm.
Gilgamesh, or there's some other famous pictures out there.
Right.
And so she has these little lions, just like Jeffrey V has on his tomb. Uh, she has the lilies and the roses and the rosettes, and all this same symbolism. And when you get into her story, it's actually about her and a young shepherd named Demused. And Demused is essentially the child sacrifice. So there's this whole long story about how she goes down to hell and she gets initiated into hell, Inanna does. And then
Yeah,
uh,
that was now Inanna, what culture is she the queen of heaven of?
Sumer.
That is early. That's Sumer.
Yeah, from what I can
Um,
tell, it kind of blends together. You might end up in the Akkadian Empire, or
yeah, yeah. It's all the similar story and descending into Hades or the underworld and then coming back is a big basis for a lot of these secret societies and mystery schools and whatnot. The allegory of descending into the underworld. Um,
absolutely. So what we'll eventually get into is the Venus and Adonis story, which is Venus is Aphrodite, right? And
right.
Aphrodite and her young consort male, potentially child sacrifice, is the same story that was the center of the Eleusinian mysteries, right?
Oh, okay.
That was the center of that experience, was the story of Persephone. And I think it was Adonis. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
they used the term Adonis there.
Yeah.
um
Wow.
so yeah, it's definitely connected with all of these sort of ancient secret, from the religions to the mystery schools. It's the same story over and over again, to the Virgin Mary, like you said earlier. It just seems
Yeah.
to keep repeating. And so I found this.
Interesting. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
What were you going to say?
It wasn't that interesting. I thought about it for another second and I decided, nope, that's not what we're talking about. Go ahead.
So um I found this idea of what I'm calling the green man, the goddess, and the philosopher's stone. And I found it all the way back to Inanna in Sumer, and all the way up to Venus and Adonis with Shakespeare. And we can even see it in our modern age, I think, if we're looking close enough.
Yeah.
So um
We can for sure see it in our architecture, maybe not quite as modern as today. I mean, I'm sure we can see it there too, but I mean, just as a touch point of it making it over here with our founding fathers and the early architecture of the early cities in America, it's the Green Man and then obviously the Queen of Heaven motif is everywhere from the Statue of Liberty to, they've got green men all over buildings all over the bigger cities and in the country. So um, that's one thing that always keeps me confident that I'm on the right path is you don't have to look much farther than any of the cities, the statues. I mean, the obelisks. I mean, this all goes back to the original Canaanite religion. The obelisk is a direct reference to Osiris Sumer, and the Babylonians had a different name for the Isis Osiris thing, but it's the exact same story. Um, yeah, I think yeah. So,
Yeah, so this
and it's all here. So, and it was here. It was put here purposely, and it wasn't put here by just anybody. It was put here by the people who built the country, created the country, who were all Masons and steeped in alchemical writings. And I mean, I think the guy who. Anyway, go ahead. Go ahead.
so we see a lot of Egyptian symbolism, like you're talking about the obelisk and stuff like that, in sort of the more modern, I guess, Freemasonry based architecture
Yeah.
and symbolism. But in the process, after I went to Inanna and Demused and found, I guess I skipped over it real quick. That story where she goes to the underworld, she's given life again by the life giving water and the life giving plant.
Right.
And it's this very alchemical story of, these demons come and sprinkle this life giving water and life giving plant on her, and she comes back to life. But there is one requirement that she has to sacrifice Demused in order to come back.
Right.
And so she goes with the demons to gather or to take Demused to the underworld. And it says there in the text that they grab Demused, the demons do, by the thigh. And basically, Demused cries out and says, he cries to the creator god, who they call Utu. And he says, I'm your relation by marriage. Basically, free me from my demons. And the agreement that they come to is that he has to spend half of the year in the underworld, and then he can come back for half the year. And this is that dying and rising god motif.
Right.
And that takes us straight into Horus and Isis, which would be these Egyptian versions that we see representations of in, say, DC and everywhere
Right.
else,
Right.
St. Peter's Basilica. Um, and Horus is absolutely the exact same thing, a dying and rising green man. Osiris is his other half, basically his dying underworld version, who had green skin in the pictures that he's represented in.
Right.
And I found in the stone pyramids of Saqqara in Egypt, there's translations of these, what they call utterances, on the walls. And I took a selection of the utterances that just show how Horus was deeply connected with this idea of alchemy, or at least the idea of living forever and some sort of elixir,
Hmm.
and plants specifically, to connect it back to the Plantagenets. And so I'll read
Hmm.
you a little bit of this. It's a little bit long. It says, "The king is a flower in the sun god's hands. I am this flower which sprang up from the earth. I am a god and the son of a god. I am a flower which is issued from the Nile, a golden flower. O Osiris, the king, take the eye of Horus and provide yourself with its perfume. Horus has given you this eye, provide your face with it, that it may cleanse you. O Horus, who is Osiris, the king, I have come and I bring to you the eye of Horus, that your heart may be refreshed in possessing it. Take your natron, which is some sort of white powder, that you may be divine. Take the eye of Horus and absorb it into your mouth. Take the eye of Horus, the cake of the gods. I'm not sure what that word is there, PST.
Right.
For they feed thereon. Your papyrus plant is the green of the turquoise of the stars. Your papyrus plant is the green of the king. Even as a living rush is green and the king is green, make green the herbage. Bring greenness to the eye of the great one. Sit upon the throne of Osiris, that you may give orders to the living, your lotus bud scepter in your hand. O you whose tree is green, O opener of the flower, O lord of green fields, O Horus, lord of the green stone."
Wow.
That makes it pretty clear that I think Jeffrey Plantagenet was basically LARPing as Horus.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
that's the
There's a
basic idea.
lot in there that could probably be all those references to different flowers and plants and colors and things like that. I bet you if you dig through like the coronation ceremonies and things like that for different monarchs, I bet you find I as you were saying them, I'm like getting flashes of images of different coronation like photographs I've seen, and Like, oh yeah, there's probably Lily. There's probably yeah,
So they say your lotus bud scepter in your hand, uh, in the kings of France, England, it would be a fleur de lis
the
scepter.
fleur de lis, right? Yeah.
Right, the top of the scepter has the fleur de lis on it, and I've actually
Yeah.
found pictures of Venus holding a very similar fleur de lis scepter. That it's like a stone carving from 4 BC.
Wow.
So so yeah, they're basically claiming this ancient right of divine kings, which we already knew,
Right.
right? But it's directly connected with the philosopher's stone and these ideas of living forever, having ultimate knowledge, and that being associated with plants and nature generally.
Hmm.
And so yeah, like I said, I think uh, at the very least, Shakespeare slash Bacon recognized this, and that's why he made such a big deal out of the Plantagenets and included them in his transmutational propaganda workings, because it in itself was already alchemical and, you know, um, pointing towards this gnosis and also the ancient religion at the same time.
Now, so the idea then is that using the kind of mechanics and philosophy of alchemy, putting two things together to get something different at the end, and applying that kind of socially, for empire building. Do you think because alchemy is kind of brushed off away from the more magical, possible occulted, darker side of what it could mean nowadays, to just be like, well, it's a philosophy for self-empowerment and
Yeah,
betterment
yeah.
and whatnot. And so you could see them doing that in empire building. But do you think, I don't think, but I think it can be blown off as, yeah, they were just using this philosophy to build empires and stop there. But I think there's a darker belief in a power to it, more than just, you know, this kind of mass hypnosis that, the world, it just got kind of is. That wasn't going to be a good point. I'm going to scratch that. I, I I I think there is a darker, more occulted um effort than just, oh, we're going to use this kind of system of alchemy to get the empire that we want. You know what I mean? Am I making any sense?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to what I said before, I think there's spirits working through these people, and they may or may not
Mm.
understand, or they do understand to different degrees, right?
Right.
But the spirit is still working through them in that way.
And in some cases, I think this was passed down. There was different pieces and parts and eras where maybe a certain group of people or a couple of generations maybe didn't see it as that, and they just saw it as the philosophy. But in just using it as the philosophy, they still furthered it down the road, and then you get some woo-woo generation that comes along and discovers, oh no, this does have power, and it is a little bit darker and a little bit more magical. And I could kind of see it going back and forth, in that it losing some of its true connection back to the fallen, and then regaining that connection later on. Somebody comes along and puts the philosophy with the working together, and then um
I think in the modern context, that's exactly what's happening, except it's being reconstituted without the biblical framework, or without the
right,
framework of there being a benevolent creator. It's within the
right,
framework of Space Brothers.
right,
And I think you can see exactly what you're talking about kind of happening again in this new way where they're reframing it and kind of understanding it in a new way. So you can see how it was valuable to include the alchemy even in Shakespeare's writings, and
right.
how it's, even if they didn't have an understanding in 1935, of these deeper alchemical concepts, we're getting to a point where there's going to be kind of like a re-revelation. You know, I've shit, I read Venus and Adonis and I'm having a re-revelation, you know, like, oh my
Right.
God, I didn't know that they
Maybe not
were.
even maybe not even 1935 not having an understanding, but just coming from that scientism side of things where they're just blowing off the woo woo. You know what I mean? And using the philosophy. Um and then now
And
we're it's coming
if
back
there's
around.
if there's speakers actually behind, they're leading us to something, right? They have some sort of agenda, a
Right.
multi-generational agenda. Then
The
you can
great
see how
work.
it would be in their benefit. It would be in their benefit to get us to, as a society, forget the origins of these things so that they can reframe
Yep.
it.
Yeah, it's interesting that they have to leave clues from now back into the beginning of time to be able to maintain these mysteries. But in doing that, nerds like you and me um pick up on it and kind of expose it to the small degree that we can. Um but that's a really interesting kind of situation that in order for them to maintain this, they have to maintain these mystery schools and these cults and secret societies and institutions that push this information along. But because they do that, for anybody who has eyes to see, we can pick up on it.
And
And
on
because of
some
that,
level, they are good, right? Like Freemasonry is
oh
not
yeah,
all bad at every level. We know that that's the case, right? That there's, like,
right.
what do you call them? Fish fry masons, right?
Fish fry masons, man. You've got, I mean, the entire the structure of masonry, and it really was. At this point, I feel like talking about Freemasons in conspiracy circles is almost um uh old hat, and it's kind of like, yeah, yeah, been there, done that. But really, it was a master stroke in creating. It was the culmination of all these mystery schools being distilled down and then spit out the other side into the order of Freemasonry. And they built these degrees in such a way that it's perfect for having a front facing group that clearly looks like benevolent, fish fry, community leading, charitable organization. Um, in wherein I mean, 90% of these guys, they go through the first three degrees, they become a master mason. I'm a master mason. That's as far as I need to go. And then, um, everything that you learn in the first, second, and third degree. I mean, you learn something in the first degree. This symbol means this quote means that. This is our story of our founding. You move up to the second degree and that all changes. Yeah, that means that for the first degree, but now you're in the second degree. So now that symbol actually means this. But don't tell that guy down there. He'll learn it when he gets to that. It's just compartmentalization that is was I mean it really is so genius that the only way that you can really expose what it is in the darker, deeper recesses of masonry, you can only do that if you are someone dedicated to becoming a dark, deep kind of mason. They have
Yeah,
all
and
these
then you
off ramps for you to go, okay, I'm good here. You know what I mean? I mean, I've got a buddy of mine who went uh made it to the 32nd degree, got real freaked out after uh attending, I think like three or four times attended a apparent I didn't know this was the case, but there are lodges that are only for 32nd degree Masons.
thought
Um,
that was the Shriners. Is that not the Shriners?
so you cannot become a Shriner unless you are a 32nd degree Mason. Or there's some point within the degrees of Masonry where now you can go the Shriner route. It's like declaring a major almost because you can go the Templar route, you can go Royal Arch. There's
Yeah.
there's different like sets, the jesters, the Shriners, the Templars. Um, but yeah, and then they have their own lodges and their own meetings and whatnot. But there are lodges just for 32nd degree Masons. Like once you get to that, there's 32 degrees, so it's the top. It's not really the top, but officially it's the top of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. Anyway, he got really freaked out and stopped paying dues, never went back. And so there are off ramps, like I'm saying. Like they didn't do anything crazy, they didn't make him sacrifice anybody or drink blood, but he got to a level where he went, "Oh shit, this ain't for me. This is just what we're doing here is weird enough to where I'm not into it." Okay, well, he's not the guy that we're gonna bring up to this other degree that goes further. It's genius. And
Yeah.
I don't think that, back in the BC days and whatnot, their mystery schools were quite as in depth with the degrees because they didn't have as much of a need for I mean, they had a need for secrecy, but it didn't have to be at that level, I don't think. Um,
I think they weren't at the point where they thought they could conquer the world. They didn't have
yeah.
this
And now, yeah,
megalomaniacal streak inside of them, but maybe they did.
yeah, it was a little more, yeah. I think they've always been trying to control the world, but I think there are enough people in the know, adepts now in positions all over the world to where it's a feasible
I think that Robert's
idea
perspective
now.
is that the Eleusinian mysteries were not necessarily negative. My sense is that they are negative. I see it as the
Yeah.
same spirit of this green man and goddess.
Did you
So
hear me? Me and Robert went back and forth on this uh on the last time I had him on the show. Him kind of yeah, he Robert's got a little woo in him. He's got a little new age, not really new
yeah,
age, but
he's
kind of
he's an
like
herbalist, man. He's an herbalist.
yes, yeah. I love him to death. But I was like, but hold on.
I'm just
You
messing.
think it just stopped at like the Eleusinian mysteries? Like they were a new thing and not doing some of this creepy stuff that we're pretty clear came from the people who did all the creepy stuff. You know what I mean? Um,
I
but
think
yeah,
his perspective, from what I understand, is basically that people submitted to themselves to the gods before, and that there was something new in this 16th century, beginning of the British Empire thing that was going on, where they thought that they could take power over nature,
yeah.
and that he thinks that the previous people didn't really think that. And I think that's a real possibility. I haven't seen anything that specifically says that they did, although I do find a lot of alchemical stories in the ancient stories that suggest at the very least they desired what we all still desire, right? Eternal life and good
At the
health. And
end of the day, in my humble opinion, at the end of the day, we can connect these ideas back to the people who did child sacrifice,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
that's enough for me to go,
it's bad.
yeah, no, this isn't okay. I think that was the conversation we were having. He was like, we don't understand it. And I totally agree with him on
Yeah.
this, that we don't understand it because our worldview is so different, our culture is so different. But he was the one who was telling me, they believe so much in this that they were willing to sacrifice their firstborn and then build them into their homes. I'm like, yeah, I don't see the
Yes.
connection there, man. Yeah, like
And
I get that they were deceived for
yeah, yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah.
But I do think that that's just simply a difference in kind of religious worldview. I mean, if you come from it from a pretty standard kind of evangelical Christian or at least of that ilk side of it, you're gonna go, yep, nope, they disqualified themselves right then and there. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Whereas if you're looking at it from a little more I don't want to say new age because I never want to paint Robert with that kind of brush. But if you're looking at it more of a hippie, like, hey, there's many roads to God, kind of thing, then I can
Yeah.
see where you can it's not as it's not as cut and dry. It's not just a straight line like I see it. I see a straight fucking line that it's got some paths that went off the straight line, but they always came back and they always came from the same line. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know,
And
it's really interesting. I think it comes down to these fallen angels, right?
yeah,
That they are essentially the old gods and that they were bad and that all the other cultures reframed them as good.
yeah, yeah.
And
They're all the same gods. Every culture has the same gods. It's as long as there were pagan um religions existing, and being formed and created and whatnot, they were just giving them different names, but they did the same thing. You had to worship them in the same way. Your offerings had to be the same, whether you were a Gaulish tribe in France that had coincidentally been influenced by Phoenician trade and whatnot,
yeah, yeah.
or you were all the way back just after the flood. You worship the Queen of Heaven in groves or around pillars or around poles, and she was birds or fertility or whatever. And then Baal was a bull and a storm god. And it didn't matter if Baal's name was Baal or
He
his
was a
name
god of
was,
vegetation too, very important. Plantagenet.
yeah. It didn't matter if his name was Baal or his name was whatever the Eurasian steppe Scythian guys were calling him. He still, that god still wanted to be worshipped in the exact same way that Baal wanted to be worshipped hundreds, thousands of years before. So to me, I was thinking about this today. It's like if somebody says, I'm going to describe an animal to you and you guess which animal I'm talking about, right? And they say it's got fur. Okay, that could be a lot of animals. It's got spots. Okay, that could be a lot of animals. When they go, it's got like 9 foot legs and it's got like a 10-foot neck. I'm going, it's a giraffe, right? You can tell me all the other things that exist, but I already know it's a giraffe, dude. You know what I mean? You don't have to explain any further. Like if I see the Scythians worshiping a storm god who carries a club and has a bull head, I don't have to know much more about that god. He was, and clearly, and then there's connective tissue of the Phoenicians coming from the Sidonians and then going all around the Mediterranean, spreading their wares and probably their religion. Like, I don't need to know. I mean, I could become an expert in every single, pagan culture and religion all over the world. But if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. I don't need to know, you know,
Yeah, it becomes pretty obvious.
I don't need to know that the giraffe has eyes and ears. They all do. You said it's got a long neck and long ass legs. It's
So
ball. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That analogy might not have made a lot of sense, but when I was saying it in my head earlier, I was like, yeah, it's kind of like that.
so
Yeah.
you keep bringing up Sidon and the Phoenicians, and there's a direct
Yes.
connection between this idea of alchemy, you know, as Zosimos said it, the art
Okay.
of chemia coming from these demons that mixed with women.
Right.
They came down, according to the Book of Enoch, the fallen angels on Mount Hermon,
Right.
which is in Lebanon, right?
Right.
Which is basically the mountainous side of Phoenicia, right? Sidon,
Right. Right.
and so there's again a direct connection there. And then the Plantagenets, you know, his daddy Falk the Fifth went down to the same region and became king of
Right.
the region, right? And then all
Right.
of a sudden, his son is representing himself as this man portion of the goddess and the green man.
Yeah. And when
So
you look
it
at Sidon, I mean, that was the first son of Canaan. Canaan and Canaanite tribes take their name from Canaan. Canaan being the son of the first of the curse,
interesting
because
story there.
yeah.
Do you know about oh, it's Ham, Shem, and Japheth. So it says that
Mhm.
Ham saw the nakedness of his father.
Yeah.
Do you know that that's a euphemism for having sex with Noah's
Yeah.
wife? Yeah.
For having sex with Noah's wife, yeah. Um, which could have been his mom or
Yeah.
possibly his stepmom, because biblically it doesn't expressly say that Noah remarried or that his wife died, but in the apocryphal text, it talks about Noah's wife having died, I guess before the flood, and then him, Noah taking on a new wife. And then that gets into the whole uh part of the Bible, Genesis 6, where it says that there were Nephilim on the earth before and then also after the
Yeah,
flood.
that's
Like it
confusing, right?
specifically says that, and people are like, well, where'd they come from? If he sent the flood to kill all, he sent the flood because all blood except for Noah's immediate family was corrupted, right? So he sent the flood to kill everything off, right? If you actually look at the translation for the when it says he flooded the world or the planet or the earth, whatever translation you're looking at, if you look at the original Hebrew,
Should be haaretz, right? The land.
yeah, which is it doesn't I can't remember what the Hebrew word is, but that particular Hebrew word uh it means a portion of land. It doesn't necessarily mean the entire, it can be a huge portion.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't everywhere else in the Bible, in the Old Testament where they're speaking in Hebrew, they use one word when they're talking about the earth as a whole, but in this particular instance they use a different word that can also mean a portion of land. So it could mean, people wonder when the second incursion of Nephilim was, if it was before the flood and after the flood. Well, then how did they get there after the flood? Well, it could have been that they went to some of these places, this higher ground in South America or, wherever else that we see Nephilim kind of old god kind of architecture and things like that, possibly, or, mythos about similar. Or there's also the possibility that, they talk about Noah's immediate family being the only ones on earth whose blood wasn't corrupted, right,
Yep.
by the fallen. Well, they don't say anything expressly about all of his sons were married. So it doesn't say anything about what came from these unions between his sons and their wives. Or if the apocryphal texts are to be believed and Noah's wife did die and that he married someone else who she was, because then there's all kinds of crazy stories and it goes deep into who Noah's second wife was in apocryphal texts, and she was, of I can't remember the specific pre-flood like tribe or culture that she was from, but she was gnarly. And so if Ham saw his father's nakedness, and that's a euphemism um for
His
banging
wife.
his wife, that either could have been his mom, which, I mean, Bible's pretty down on incest, so that would be a good reason to curse them.
I think that explains it. I heard this from Rob Skiba. Do you know who Rob Skiba is?
Yeah, yeah,
He's dead
yeah,
now. He got killed by the
yeah.
hospital. But
Yeah, I've heard it. I actually I heard it. I can't. I think the podcast Prometheus Lens had my buddy Tim Constantine on it, and they were talking about it. So maybe that's they were digging into it, and then I just happened to have Tim Constantine as a guest on, or no, I was, yeah, I don't know, but I ended up repeating their research right back to them. I was like, yeah, because you know that this actually means, yeah, and he was like, yeah, yeah. And then it was like a week later that I was like, oh shit, I heard that from listening to you, man. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
so I think like in a Mendelian P genetics kind of way, if you remember that class. Do you
No,
remember P genetics? It's a
no.
basic thing they would teach you when they're teaching you genetics, how like
Yeah,
um
I tapped out in science and math classes when I was in school, dude.
this
Yeah,
guy
no.
Mendel, he mixed a bunch of peas together
Okay,
and
I
he could
remember
like make
Mendel.
peas
Yeah.
with pink flowers and shit like
Okay.
that. And he figured out this little box system of genetics where it's like, okay, you have I'm gonna misspeak here. You have like strong phenotypes and you have weak phenotypes and you'll get different mixtures of these phenotypes based on the two parents, basically,
Okay.
is what he figured out. And so to me, it seems like, first of all, it's odd that after Ham does that to his mother, supposedly, I'm assuming it was his mother, that Noah curses Canaan, which is the child born of it, right? He doesn't
Right.
curse Ham for doing
Well,
it. He
Canaan
curses
was
the
actually
child.
already Canaan was already born.
No, Canaan was maybe. No, I'm pretty sure Canaan was the result of that event.
No, Canaan already existed.
It
He
doesn't
didn't
actually say.
he didn't curse. I'll have to look it up because I could be wrong, but I've had this conversation with somebody else about this. I think that Canaan was already alive because the speculation or the argument was or the pushback was like, why would he curse his grandson who's already kicking around? I
Well,
could be wrong,
I
but I
think he
think we
cursed him
looked into
because
that.
he was the product of what
That's
Ham
what
did
I
to his mother.
assumed.
Yeah.
That's what I assumed. But
Which is why you find all
yeah,
the giants in the land of Canaan when the
right,
Israelites come in years later, right? Because
right,
if I think the way I described it is if so it says Noah was perfect in his generations, but if his mother wasn't, then
right,
maybe Ham wasn't either, right? And maybe Ham got kind of the recessive genes of the Nephilim,
right.
right? And so in
Yeah,
order to increase those Nephilim genes, he would have to mate with someone who has Nephilim genes, which would be his
right,
mother, right? There's only 8 people left.
right.
I guess technically it could have been one of his
Yeah. So
sister-in-laws.
so that's the way I assumed it too. And that's what makes sense to me that he was the product of banging somebody with with a little bit of Nephilim blood
Yeah.
in him. But I somebody corrected me and they may have been wrong too, but I've been um
That's what I gather from reading the story,
yeah.
but I have not researched any like associated information really.
Well, and then I believe if I'm not mistaken, there's also apocryphal texts about Ham's wife who came on board with them, right? During the flood. And it's not expressly in the Bible, but in some apocryphal texts, she was like this witch, like soothsayer chick, and she came from a specific like tribe, pre-flood tribe. And so there's a bunch of stuff about her, and they also go the apocryphal texts and researchers and different like cults and stuff go real deep into like her and what you know. So regardless of where Canaan came from,
Yeah.
it could the exact same thing. Like if whoever corrected me is right, that Canaan was already alive when Ham banged whoever Noah's wife was, or if it came from the product of him banging Noah's wife. Um, Either way, he could have that same situation with containing being the progeny of
I think that story
Nephilim.
is the explanation of what you were saying earlier, and where it says in Genesis, and also after that, the confusing
Right.
line of, oh, they were also there afterwards.
Yeah, that's
I,
where I lean too. I lean that yeah, it had something to do with the uh the wives and whatever.
yeah,
Yeah, the bloodline making it because you don't necessarily you see giants, you see the evidence of bigger people, but you don't see the power that the fallen angels had. I mean, they kind of ran crap on Earth before the flood. I mean, they wanted to take, Earth women as wives and they just did it. And they taught them all these things and they changed all this stuff and that's why and things got so out of hand that God was like, yeah, no, we're cutting this short, right? But you don't see that necessarily that level of power, but you do see the veneration of those guys. So it's almost like just that generation right after the flood is like, yeah, remember these guys were powerful, and that's who
hmm,
we're gonna worship. Those are our gods
yeah,
because we're cursed. So we're not gonna worship the guy who cursed the god that cursed us, right?
yeah.
We're gonna worship these other guys because they're on our team. They were cursed too. You know what I mean?
And that is literally the story of Venus and Adonis.
Is it?
Right? I mean, well, not the details of the story, but the
Yeah.
idea of these, the veneration of these ancient gods. That's why Shakespeare made that his first poem, right? Because it's this ancient idea, and it is directly connected with Sophia and knowledge and this Gnostic idea of man conquering the universe, Gnostic alchemical idea of man conquering universe. And
Huh.
whether the ancients had such an extreme view of it as Bacon did, like, yeah, we can do this thing, I
Yeah.
would say is unclear, but it's the same spirit that's behind that ancient worship and
Yeah.
Bacon's incarnation of it, and our modern scientific incarnation of it.
Yeah. It does seem like a progression too. Like I guess even for the Canaanite tribes worshiping, and they sound real scary in the Bible, the giants and whatnot, but um, at a certain on a certain level, they were just surviving. They were, you know what I mean? It was survival. So yeah, I guess maybe their power to finish the great work, take over the planet or whatever it is. Yeah, it's been a progression,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
they're finally to the level.
And
Anyway,
Bacon, I think, was at that precipice where he was like, "Yeah, we can do this."
yeah, now it's, and he amalgamated, if I can use a fake version of that word, all of that into, it goes into Bacon and it comes out scientism. It comes out the empirical method. It comes out. Um, I was saying on another podcast recently, like not that it hasn't been said a million times, but you know, science is magic. Some of it is great and helpful and whatnot, and some of it is brutally evil.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's dark. Um, and the only reason that we look at some of these dark magical things and go, nope, that's just science. Science is because it was given that word by Bacon, and it was given that method by Francis Bacon. He literally took stuff
you might
that
call it
was,
social alchemy.
you just might, I thought somebody was talking about that. Yeah, dude. It's yeah, sorry for repeating your thesis right back to you, but yeah, that's it. I mean, he took it and he made it, I mean, more than just making something mainstream. I mean, he literally took the weird and goes, "No, no, no, no. This is normal." And now we're all gonna treat it as normal. It's it's really unprecedented, that much change that you can find like flowing through like one guy.
Yeah,
We talk about Bacon a lot, but he really was something different, man. And I didn't realize, but and I'll have to find where it is. But I was talking to that guy Tim Constantine, and he was talking about specific writing from Francis Bacon, where Francis Bacon talks about being writing things and creating parts of the scientific method and stuff like that, and being overtaken by a muse and it writing through him. I'd never heard that part of him. I thought he kept most of that, the woo, away. Like he was pretty good at keeping that, like that woo stank off of him. You
yeah,
know what
yeah.
I
He
mean?
was.
Yeah,
He
I mean,
he thought he was better than everyone else, so he constantly
yeah,
comes across as like
yeah,
derogatory towards everything.
yeah, very condescending.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, dummies, I got it covered. That's Bacon. If Bacon talked like me, that's how he would talk.
Yeah, I know. It takes one
All
to know
right,
one.
dummies, take it easy. It's science.
So I guess a couple more interesting points to connect this goddess and green man with the Plantagenets. Um, I guess first, something that I didn't mention before is that there's always this connection with transgenderism in the goddess and the green man.
Right,
And it's almost like, especially in the Inanna and Demusid tales, it's like they're being combined into one a lot of the times. And you
right,
actually find the phrase about Inanna. It says that she has the power to turn a man into a woman and a woman into a man.
right.
And so, coming forward to the time of the Plantagenets, they actually owned the island of Cyprus in, I think it was 1191, I want to say, and
Okay.
it was owned by Geoffrey Plantagenet's son, no, Henry II's son, Richard the Lionheart. So Geoffrey Plantagenet's grandson. And he sold it to the Templars, the island of Cyprus. And
All right, can you pause? I'm sorry because this touches on my ley line from my William and Mary pyramid over to the
yeah,
Great Pyramid of Giza. It go one, I've shown you that, or you've seen that,
yep,
the
yep,
pyramid, exact encode of the pyramid on the original campus, and then you follow it all the way over in Atlanta. It's almost undeniable. Like you can't move it to the other pyramid and it makes sense. It's that, right?
yep.
It's, I've been digging deeper into what else lays on that line. One thing that's really interesting is when it goes through the south of France, it goes directly over the cave home of the supposed cave home of Mary Magdalene. So the theory that she got knocked up with Jesus's kid and then fled the Holy Land and ended up in the south of France near Marseille, and that she lived the rest of her life like 30 years in a cave in the woods and um, uh, preached from there basically. That cave, the cave of Saint Balm, is directly on that line, which I found crazy. But then it goes, Cyprus is right off the coast there, right?
It's like almost in the middle of the Mediterranean.
No, see, I'm confused now.
Sicily, maybe?
No, I'm not thinking Sicily. It's not Cyprus. I just wasted a bunch of time on nothing. It might, no, I think it is Cyprus. Is that where Napoleon came from?
No, he was a Corsican.
Ah, it's Corsica. Never mind. Ignore me. Shame. I'm an idiot. Damn it, dude. I thought, oh
Nice
man.
try, nice try.
But you were saying Cyprus? Sorry, dude.
All right,
Corsica. Dang it.
so close in
Not
the
really.
Mediterranean, which is all very important, honestly. I
Yeah.
think that's where the Antichrist comes in to
Yeah.
to reference your conversations with Brisson.
Dude, this thing, I got another one coming up tomorrow, and I'm
Nice,
stoked about it. Yeah.
nice. Um, all right, so the island of Cyprus, they owned it. They sold the Plantagenets owned it. They sold it to the Templars in 1191. The story of the gods of Cyprus is basically a king god man named Cinyras, whose daughter tricks him into incest, and she gets pregnant, and then
That old Jim.
he banishes her. He says you got to go, and her name is Myrrha, and that's what the myrrh tree is named after, where we get the incense myrrh.
Right.
Adonis was born out of this tree, so she actually turns into the tree while she's still pregnant, and then Adonis is born out of the tree. So if you
Okay.
want to talk about, being of a vegetal descent like
Right.
Plantagenet, Adonis is exactly that.
Oh, wow.
So on the island of Cyprus, there are cults of Venus and Adonis that are very ancient. And one of them is called Venus Barbata or Aphroditus. And she is male and female. So she is a female figure with a dick and a beard.
There you go.
And I found a fourth century explanation from, oh man, I forget the guy's name. Anyway, the work is called Saturnalia, and he wrote in there, oh, actually, I have it right here. His name was Macrobius. And he said there's also a statue of Venus on Cyprus that's bearded, shaped, and dressed like a woman with scepter and male genitals. And they conceive her as both male and female. She is the moon, and men sacrifice to her in women's dress, women in men's, because she is held to be both male and female. And this is a fundamentally alchemical concept, right? In all
Right.
alchemical texts, there's a mixture of the male king and the female
Mhm.
queen. And you find it right there on the island of Cyprus in the cult of Venus, long before, the Plantagenets took over, and long before they were showing signs of worshiping the goddess and the green man.
Yeah.
And So yeah, they have this direct connection to the island of Cyprus and this very alchemical worship of Venus and Adonis. And so it's really no surprise that Bacon would have made his first work, Venus and Adonis. He even calls it in the introduction. He says it's the first heir of my invention. And
Oh wow.
the whole thing is alchemical elitist signaling. I'll spare you the quotes, but
That sounds interesting too. Just that quote, the first heir of my invention. I mean, for, a nobody grain salesman who was kind of a scumbag,
right.
um, to go, not only is this a pretty great poem, but you just wait. It sounds a lot more like, hey, I've got a guy who's like, I got a big plan, and this is the first portion of it.
Yeah, and
Doesn't
by
sound
the
like
way,
some
that's why I
guy
filled
trying
it.
his hand out at poetry and
Yeah,
just
yeah, and
happens to be
he's
great
also
at it.
saying, and by the way, that's why I made it about the green man and the goddess and filled it with alchemical language.
Yeah.
Hint, hint, wink, wink. We're gonna do this thing.
Yeah, you're setting the stage.
Mm-hmm.
It's the key um at the bottom of the map. It's telling you that's interesting. Now, Robert's done a lot of stuff you know like that. Each play being a different portion of like this one's about initiation. And then that kind of sets the stage for the other plays. If you know that this is about initiation, then you know what's being referenced in the other plays. And so for that to be the first the first thing in the Shakespearean hand to come out for any adept reading through it, they know, okay, this is important and this is where we're starting from. This colors everything that comes afterwards. And anybody
Yep.
who comes across the entire, canon of Shakespeare later, they can use that. Oh, this was the first play. Oh, he's stating right out of the gate, this is,
Yeah, he's an initiate.
yeah.
So you can see confirmations of this on the frontispiece or the cover for the first printed edition of Venus and Adonis, which
Hmm.
was 1593. At the top is an image of the goddess right in the middle of the top of the image. And she has a peacock on either side of her, which peacocks are alchemical symbolism.
Hmm.
It's talking about a stage in which you're boiling stuff and it turns a whole bunch of different colors, and they describe it as
Okay.
peacock feathers. And then on the outside of those peacocks is a little horned man coming out of a plant. He's literally being born from the fruit of a plant, and he's got horns on
Hmm.
his. He's a satyr, basically, right? So
Right.
right there on the cover of Venus and Adonis, you have clear alchemical symbolism that is referencing the green man and the goddess.
But
Um,
his kids couldn't read.
yeah, right.
Just throw that out there. He left his wife a bed in his will.
Yeah, the second bed, right? Second best bed.
The second best bed. You jerk.
So he hid more. Just quickly to go through it,
Yeah.
he hid a story. If you okay, so to go back a little bit, it's generally considered that a book by a Roman poet called Metamorphosis
Hmm.
is the source and inspiration for Venus and Adonis by Shakespeare. So if you read that story in Metamorphosis, there's actually very little about Venus and Adonis. And what it is the beginning is a short section about Venus and Adonis, and the end is a short section about Venus and Adonis. But the whole middle is about Atalanta and Hippomenes. And you can actually find a veiled reference to Atalanta and Hippomenes in Shakespeare's Venus and Adonis, and it's not obvious at all. And as far as I know, no one has ever said that that's what this is.
Really?
But to me, it's clear, and it's again mixed with alchemical language. And when I read it, knowing the story of Ovid, I say, "Oh shit, that's Atalanta and Hippomenes," and he's
Yeah.
referencing them. He's actually transmuting them because in the original story, they're turned from humans. Actually, Hippomenes is God man. He's the grandson of Neptune, so he's a hero.
Okay.
But in that story, after they get married, I'll save you the whole story. But after they get married, they're turned into lions, red lions, and they're yoked to the goddess Cybele, to her chariot. You brought
Okay.
up Tracy Twyman previously. She was really on to
Yeah.
Cybele as the
Yeah.
kind of the source of the elite's religion, or
Yeah.
the main focal point of their worship. So she's in this story, and Atalanta and Hippomenes are yoked to her chariot. And then in Shakespeare's story, they actually are horses, and they go running free into the woods afterwards. It's Adonis's horse and a wild horse, and they go have this alchemical sexual experience and run off into the woods. So basically, Shakespeare is changing them again from yoked lions into unyoked horses.
Hmm.
And I think if you understand the story and you read it within the context of uh, alchemical hints and nods, you can see clearly that he's referencing alchemy. And then, no surprise, Bacon later goes on in his other writings to reference Atalanta as nature's or art's power over nature, which I have a whole quote of that in here, which gets us
Yeah.
directly back to the alchemical philosophical idea that they could conquer nature with their art. And he says it. He says Atalanta is art, and it's her speed that gives her her power. And then he complains about how everyone turns aside and uh, you know seeks after commodity and profit instead of going after ultimate gnosis, as their goal.
Right.
So yeah, in the end, I think what the story is about this search for ultimate gnosis, and this idea that man can have power over nature, and how that has created our current situation that we're living in. And I
You've
think
got a
we
pretty good
I
argument
think
for it for sure.
I think we'll all have a very real choice here at some point in the future,
Yeah.
to choose between, again, to go back to your talks with Brisson, they're going to try to put this technology in us. Not that you guys have gotten to that point yet, but
No, not yet. We're taking it slow, but dude is God, he's like a encyclopedia, man. But as scary as he makes, like just the damn white horse, I'm terrified to keep going, but I'm stoked about it. Yeah, it's gonna get weirder before it gets less weird, I guess. Um, yeah, it does seem really strange how much it feels like things are culminating. And at this point, it doesn't. It seems uh like they're hiding it less. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Used
I
to be
think we're
you had
being
to.
acclimatized.
Yeah, I mean, you used to have to really dig and get FOIA requests and declassified paperwork and stuff. And now it's happening on the news like on a daily basis. I mean, they're following scripts.
Yeah, that's the real danger. They know this stuff too, right? And they're going to try to
Yeah,
use it to manipulate people.
yeah. And whether or not they'll be successful at it, is one thing. The fact is that they believe it and they don't care about using you as fodder, you know, to accomplish, but they believe it. I mean, that's the people who control us are the people who believe dark stuff. And I always like to remind myself too, they don't believe a lie. They're believing in real crap. It's just the opposite side. It's the
Yeah,
bad
yeah,
side, dude. It's like Darth Vader was real. It's just the guys that worked with him were dicks. You know what I mean? Like I think that's the thing, and I think that has come a lot from I think that's been enforced by modern Christianity being so terrified to talk about um end times prophecy, Nephilim, demons, fallen angel. Um, evangelical Christianity is so sanitized and plastic and Disney-ish now,
Yeah. Yeah.
that I think there's a real ability for people who are like, church going, all their life folks to be able to just kind of put that darkness like to the side while they're doing it right in front of you. Like they're setting it up right in front of you. And so many people are able to just look past it and be like, no, it's just same old, same old. It's not, dude. Stuff is ramping up. It's getting weird, man. I mean, it's
Yeah.
getting weird.
It's no coincidence, I don't think, that the Plantagenets who took over and his father became the king of Jerusalem, uh that there's this prophecy in the Bible that Jerusalem will become Mystery Babylon that the
Right.
whore rides on, right? And
Right.
so you can see this worship of the Queen of Heaven coming forward into some sort of international city of Jerusalem where they worship in total deception and they worship the works of their hands, right? They worship the results of this alchemy turned into science.
You
And
want to hear something fairly interesting? I don't know if I've ever shared this with you before, and I'm not done with my this is like a side piece of research that and it just struck me as relevant, but and it's a side piece of research that's too big, so I haven't like even gotten into pieces of it really yet. Um like sharing it. But I think I found something early on in my research within a Shakespeare play that points to Bacon pointing out who his mother and father were. I mean, we all, a lot of people in the Bacon sphere assume that he was probably Elizabeth's son. Um,
yep.
but I think I have found something that where he states who his father was because it's Dudley is the assumed father,
Mm-hmm.
the up jumped Lord of the Horse, literally the stable boy.
Yep.
Um, um, but I don't think that's who it is. I've actually run um, Bacon next to his father through AI. Bacon, like their portraits. Bacon next to Dudley through AI, and then also Bacon next to King Philip II of Spain through
Okay.
AI, and AI shits on Bacon and his father Nicholas. No way. They're like faces are too different. I've always thought that it was strange for a ginger Elizabeth and a ginger Dudley to have a kid that is as dark-eyed and dark-haired as Francis Bacon. So I always found that weird. But AI, at least AI, um, in conjunction with what I found in Shakespeare, I don't want to say exactly what it is until I present all the research, but it's pretty compelling. Um, it's a place in one of his plays where he talks about specifically the king of Naples, who at that time was King Philip of Spain. And then in the next portion that I found for a certain reason, he talks about the Virgin Queen. And then the third place, he talks about the child. So I think he's
Hmm.
pointing to her, him, and then the child.
At the
Um,
very least, you've found some more Green Man and Goddess references.
how's that?
Well, it sounds like the exact same thing. The Virgin Queen, the child,
Oh yeah. Yeah,
father.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, here's what's interesting though, right? So they, I can't remember who it was, but I believe it was in the 20th century. It might have been in the 1800s. Some of these, there's been tons of guys who have broken all kinds of Baconian ciphers and whatnot. One of the most famous ones is in one of the Shakespearean works. The word Plantagenet comes out, and they have they've used that as evidence that look, Bacon's saying right here that he's Plantagenet. Well, if his if his mother was Elizabeth, but his dad was Dudley, technically he wouldn't have the royal blood of being a Plantagenet. But if his father was the king of Spain, who comes from Plantagenet, and his mother was Elizabeth, then he would be um, Plantagenet, which plays into, I mean, this guy is adding all this Plantagenet stuff into his, and quite possibly if, and then there's all kinds of crazy stuff about when, uh, Queen Elizabeth was not seen or heard from for like right around the time if she had gotten knocked up in 59. He was born supposedly Francis Bacon was born in 61. I think he was born 7 months earlier in 60 in 15 or in yeah in 1560. Um because when he's baptized, he's actually given the moniker Mr. Franciscus Bacon, and they never back in those days ever used for an infant. They never gave them the title of Mr. So it could denote an older baby um, being baptized than an infant. Um, I think that
Hmm.
also they were just a English Channel away from each other. Philip of Spain was in Brussels, and then he was it Bruges? Anyway, he was very close to the coast. And then she actually spent time in 59 aboard a ship named after her brother, or I mean after her sister who had just died, and her husband who was King Philip of Spain, right? She went to check on the navy and spent 2 nights on this ship named after Philip and Bloody Mary, right? It was during that exact time that he supposedly left Brussels, went up the English Channel, and then headed back to the Iberian back, right? Which would have put him coming literally like half an English Channel away from her in a boat while she is spending the night, which was on her. Anyway, there's all kinds of weird stuff that I don't think anybody's ever explored that because Francis Bacon was supposedly born in 61. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't believe it was. I believe that, and then there's the period in 1560 where she doesn't see anybody. Also, at the same time, Philip of Spain has like 2 spies that are physicians that are reporting on the fact that during this period, like 6 months in 1560, she's like bedridden with dropsy, which is swelling of the abdomen, and she doesn't see anybody. It's the only time in the history of the Tudors that they don't go on this like during that exact period of the year they would go out and tour the different areas of the kingdom or whatever. It's the first and only time that a Tudor didn't do that and she didn't do it. He also King Philip of Spain has one of his guys inside her court um bribe tries to bribe her chambermaid to be able to inspect her bed sheets for menstruation cycles. Anyway, I think that Francis Bacon was the son of King Philip of Spain and Queen Elizabeth, actually. And like I
It
said,
looks
I
li-
put him.
just looking stuff up. I'm not checking the details, but it looks like he proposed to her at one
Oh
point.
yeah, he proposed to her in Bloody Mary dies in 58. He then proposes to Queen Elizabeth, and she rebuffs her proposal. But for 6 months after that, they share intimate correspondence back and forth. He knew she was going to be there, right near the English Channel, right on the coast there, and he decides to leave where he had been for a few years in Brussels and cruise up the English Channel at the same time. Now, there's no proof that there was a meeting, but that specific river that she was up, this estuary, that she was up where the British Navy was like uh, housed, was a known area that before and after this, Spain would smuggle information in and out of England from. So it was a secretive. Anyway, it that was a really weird tangent. But I think it's interesting that if Bacon ever found that out, who his daddy was, added to who his mama was, and he goes, "I'm Plantagenet," and then he writes Shakespeare, and he vomits Plantagenet stuff all over Shakespeare. But if he was Dudley's kid, whatever.
You know,
Yeah.
he didn't leave out very many kings in his histories. It's pretty much a
Hmm.
succession. The one he left out was Henry VII, the first
Hmm.
Tudor. And later in his life, he wrote an entire history of Henry VII.
Right.
So it's always struck me as that he thought of him as his grandpappy.
Oh, and also I ran the facial stuff. It nailed it on Philip and Bacon. They have the I mean, if you look at Francis Bacon, he's got a beard always, but he's got a Habsburg jaw. He's got them weird pouty poking out lips, and he's
Yeah, yeah,
got the
yeah.
Habsburg jaw. Look at his eyes; they're the same as Philip.
Bulging.
Their
Yeah, no,
their
he looks like
hairline is the
he
same.
looks like Rudolph II, actually, now that you bring it up,
Mhm.
which is the same line.
Bacon has Habsburg um characteristics for sure, and he wouldn't
Yeah,
get that from Nicholas Bacon.
I'd buy it.
Yeah, and their countenances were similar. Philip of Spain and Bacon, they were actually fairly similar in their almost kind of melancholy, described as like melancholy intelligence and whatnot. Anyway, um, yeah, that was a long way to just say, yeah, I think he did have some vested interest in the Plantagenet thing, because that's the other thing. Like, unless you nail down, I don't think Bacon's interest was just furthering the furthering the English Empire. Robert's pretty dead set on like he was an imperialist and he was. I think it was deeper. I think he recognized himself as part of that bloodline, and thus he had a divine right to rule and change things and create and be a monarch in some way, which he was never going to get to do.
I think he
Um,
really wanted to be a part of the secret college, or he wanted to create the secret college that you see in the New Atlantis, and that
yeah,
is essentially founded in Rosicrucianism, right? Like that's kind of what it comes out of.
I
And I
wonder if his mom had just acknowledged him as her son and he got to be like the king. If any of this would ever happen,
and if
because
you
it
could be gay publicly.
you're right. Because it does seem like a pissed off teenager being like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to change it all." And it is very interesting when the Stuarts come into power. He you know he had fallen out of favor with Elizabeth, and then when the Stuarts come back in power, they're like, "Yeah, get over here on our side now. Take all your old jobs back, and you're going to be our guy again." And
Yeah.
when you look at, I mean, the Mary Queen of Scots was, the cousin of Elizabeth. So it's still the same bloodline and just as much Templar connection with the Stuarts coming in. Maybe even more. You know what I mean? When you look at the possibility of the Stuarts or the Templars being kind of sheltered in Scotland with the Sinclairs. And then, of course, you've got all the Green Man symbolism all over Rosslyn
Yeah,
Chapel,
yeah,
which was
yeah,
built
yeah.
by Sinclair. Anyway, I should probably let you go, man, or I'll keep vomiting all my research all over you. And this
No
was the
worries.
show to talk about yours, but man, this is a banger, dude. You got anything else? Or you think you?
Uh, I don't. I mean, we could keep going, but I think we've hit the points. I think we're good.
All right, dude. Man, every time you come on, it's awesome. I'm start this is starting to be a podcast of like six guests. Just that's who I like to talk to, and like I'll get other different guests on. I got some people coming up, but you guys knock it out of the park every time you're on. So you, Brisson, Constantine, Robert, um, just keep having you back on, dude. Every time you get more of this done and you want to talk about it, dude, please.
I appreciate
Anytime.
it, sir.
Yeah, brother. Also, have I gotten you in contact with Mark from My Family Thinks I'm Crazy?
No, but I've heard that guy on some shows before. I think
Okay.
maybe I heard him on Nephilim Death Squad.
Yeah, he's good and he does all the booking for Tinfoil Hat. And he's awesome to talk to. And this is right up his alley. And if you want, I mean, I can't just tell him to put you on the show, but I'll absolutely share your email and stuff with him, because he's always looking for guests and whatnot. And I think he'd do great on there. And this will
Sure, thank you,
be,
sir.
yeah, I'll do that if you're okay with me sending him your
Just
email.
just to throw one last thing in there,
Yeah, do it.
talking about Nephilim Death Squad, uh, it reminded me of the Plantagenets origin story. They say they come from Melusine, I think is the
Melusine. Yeah, the
yeah,
like snake-bodied chick or something like that. Yeah.
absolutely. It's also the Starbucks symbol, the double fish
Yes.
tail lady,
Yes.
and she's
And that
supposed
comes from the Carolinians, which is the very beginning before Charlemagne. They come from that. So the Plantagenet, that's their line into that. And
and
then the
she's
Merovingians had another, they had a weird origin story. And of course, the Merovingians turn into the Plantagenets through the female line and then come, but they have a weird, like, pagan goddess origin story too. I can't remember what that one's name is.
and Melusine is a succubus spirit. She comes and has sex with dudes in the night.
Yeah.
So it's all very oddly connected. It's
Yep.
strange.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, dude, thank you so much,
Yep.
everybody. He doesn't have a book to buy yet, but if I have anything to do with it, I will.
Oh, I do have a Substack now.
Yeah,
Shakespeare's Climate
plug it.
Change. You
Shakespeare's
can go
Climate
read this.
Change on Substack.
You can go read this there. You can listen to me read it and do ridiculous voices.
Uh, I finally was able to listen to it, a bit of it on Substack.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty good, dude.
Good. Thank
Yeah,
you, sir.
keep doing what you're doing because yeah, don't just record it on Zoom like I was I was saying, dude. There's some production value to it, and I was like, oh, okay, he's doing this. All right. So
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, it sounded really good. All right, brother. Well, have a good night. Thank you once again.
Thank
Hit
you.
me up anytime you want to come back on, dude.
Yeah. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, brother. Later, man.
Have a good night.